Welcome to the Deep Dive, a segment of Reformed Thinking. Our goal here is pretty straightforward. Take a stack of information articles, research, maybe your own notes, and really pull out the most significant insights. We want to give you a shortcut, a way to be genuinely well-informed, hopefully with some surprising observations and enough good discussion to keep you listening. Each deep dive is custom built for you, our listener, helping you grasp what really matters in the material you've given us. Today, we're diving into a topic that, well, it touches nearly everyone: God's design for marriage. We have some really rich sources here, drawing from key biblical texts like Genesis and Ephesians, plus some insightful theological reflections that build on them. Our mission, really, is to unpack these writings to get a handle on how Christian marriage is meant to point to something much, much bigger than just two people getting together.
That's right. We'll be looking at the divine pattern for marriage, recognizing it points towards ultimate spiritual realities. Our discussion will cover why God created man and woman in the first place, those distinct yet unified roles of husbands and wives, reflecting Christ and the church, and even a unique way of thinking about joy within marriage. We'll also touch on why this understanding is particularly vital for pastors. This isn't just about, rules or a checklist. It's about a design for happiness and purpose that really extends beyond the couple themselves. The divine pattern of marriage, a revelation of Christ and the church.
Okay, let's start digging into this. Our sources describe marriage as a mystery. Now, when Paul calls it that in Ephesians 5, quoting Genesis, what's he getting at? It sounds like there's more to marriage than, well, what meets the eye.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. What's really striking here is Paul's use of that Greek word, mysterion, mystery. In the Bible, a mystery isn't, like an unsolvable riddle. It's more like a truth that was hidden or maybe only partly seen, but now God is revealing it more fully. It's God pulling back the curtain on his plan. So when Paul says this mystery refers to Christ and the church, he's basically saying marriage holds a meaning far bigger than just its outward form. It's not just a human contract.
Mm-hmm.
And the sources are quite clear on this point. God didn't look at human marriage and then pattern Christ and the church after it. Instead, he actually created human marriage based on the pattern of Christ's relationship to the church, a relationship that was planned, from eternity before anything was made.
Okay, that's a huge reversal of how we normally think about it.
It is. It means every Christian marriage, when it follows God's design, is meant to be, a kind of living parable, a visible symbol of that covenant relationship between Christ and his people. Married people have this incredible privilege, really, to display these amazing divine realities. It makes marriage into this tangible illustration of a cosmic truth. It really reframes the whole thing.
It absolutely does. So to understand this mystery better, the sources take us right back to the start. Back to Genesis. God says, "It is not good that the man should be alone." Now, the point isn't that Adam wasn't close to God or that the gardening was too much work. So what was God really intending with that statement and with creating Eve?
Well, this gets to something fundamental about how we're made, doesn't it? Adam had perfect fellowship with God. He had creation all around him. But he was designed, apparently, not just to receive God's goodness, but to let it flow through him, to convey it to another human. He was meant to be a sharer, a conduit for God's bounty, not just a cul-de-sac, like a dead end where grace stops. Our own flourishing, maybe even our completeness, isn't found just in ourselves, but in sharing the grace we get from God with someone else, fostering that mutual love.
So it's inherently relational.
Exactly. And animals, well, they couldn't fill that specific need. The sources say they could help plenty, sure, but only another human could be a fellow heir of the grace of life. Only another person could truly receive and appreciate God's favor in that reciprocal way.
The sources use this illustration. It's quite different sharing, say, the northern lights with your beloved compared to sharing them with your dog, right?
Yeah. Different level of shared experience. Totally different. It just highlights that deep relational need we have for each other, a need only met by another human capable of that deep communion. Adam needed someone who could reflect back that shared life in God.
And then there's the detail of Eve being created from Adam's rib. The sources say she was like him and yet unlike him. What's the significance there of her being a woman, not another man, and this idea of harmony versus unison?
That's key. God forming woman from Adam's own flesh and bone, that points to this really intimate basic unity. But by making a woman, not another man, he established unity through diversity. He created heterosexuality. And this difference isn't random. It allows for a richer, deeper kind of unity. The sources use the music analogy, harmony versus unison. Unison is everyone singing the same note. Harmony is when different notes, soprano, alto, tenor, bass combine. And, well, anyone who appreciates music knows harmony usually stirs something deeper than just unison, right?
Yeah, it's a much richer sound.
Exactly. So God made a counterpart who was like Adam in their shared humanity, but distinctly unlike him in her sex. This allows for a complementarity, a different note that creates a fuller sound when they come together.
Hmm.
And this creation of woman and their union into one flesh that directly patterns the relationship between Christ and his church. It sets the stage for what marriage is supposed to mirror. God seems to delight in both unity and diversity.
So that one flesh idea from Genesis 2.24, it's clearly way more than just physical union. It's mirroring something massive. How does Paul then link that directly to Christ and the church becoming one body?
Paul sees this direct, intended parallel. It's really the core of the mystery he's unfolding. Just as husband and wife become one flesh,
Hmm.
Christ and the church become one body. He paints this picture. Christ is the husband, the church is the bride. Conversion is like the betrothal, and Christ's second coming is the final presentation of the bride in glory. And again, the crucial thing, the direction of the pattern. God made human marriage based on the Christ-church relationship, which was planned from eternity.
Right, the eternal plan came first.
Precisely. So marriage is this divine parable or symbol of Christ's relationship with his people. It holds a meaning far deeper than just what we see on the surface. Our human marriages, then, are designed to put these incredible divine realities on display. From the very start, marriage had this sacred purpose to picture the covenant love between God's Son and his people. It gives marriage a cosmic significance. 2. Christ's headship, the blueprint for husbands.
Okay, so if marriage patterns the Christ-church relationship and the husband's role models Christ's, what are the main things about Christ's headship over the church that husbands are supposed to copy? The sources mention he's both a supplier savior and an authority leader.
Yes, those two aspects are really central in the source's explanation. First, Christ is supplier or savior. He's the source from which the whole church grows, right?
Mm-hmm.
He provides everything needed for spiritual life, health, growth. He gave himself for the church to cleanse her, make her holy, present her in splendor, without fault. So this part of his headship is about his active, self-giving care for the church's ultimate well-being and sanctification. He nourishes and cherishes the church.
Okay, the provision and care aspect.
Right. Then second, he's also authority and leader. God appointed him head over all things for the church, giving him supreme rule and dominion over everything else. Christ definitely exercises leadership. He guides, directs, protects, governs his church with perfect wisdom and love. So the big question for husbands then becomes, how do you embody both this generous supply and this purposeful authority in a way that mirrors Christ in marriage?
All right, so how do those two functions, supplier and leader, translate into the husband's actual role? What does that greater responsibility look like according to the sources?
Well, connecting it to Christ's example, a husband's headship means taking on a primary responsibility for supplying his wife's needs. And that's not just material things, though that's included, but also protection, emotional care, her spiritual flourishing. He's to be a source of provision and shelter, like Christ is for the church.
So it's holistic care.
Very much so. And beyond supply, it also means taking greater responsibility for leadership in the family, especially providing moral vision and spiritual guidance. Now, the sources stress this isn't about being a dictator. It's not about barking orders. It's about accepting a deeper personal accountability for the well-being of his wife and family. It's a call to proactive, self-sacrificial provision and guidance, patterned after Jesus, who gave himself completely for his bride. It's bearing a heavier load of loving oversight for the family's direction.
But then there's Christ washing the disciples' feet. The sources highlight that his leadership is marked by humble service. How does that mesh with authority and leadership? That seems really crucial for husbands to get right.
It absolutely is, and it prompts that question about what true leadership looks like in God's kingdom. Christ leads not by, abandoning his authority, but by using it in a way that serves and benefits the church sacrificially. The sources make that point strongly. Even when he was washing feet, nobody doubted who the leader was. He demonstrated that true greatness involves service, but he didn't stop being the leader.
That's a key distinction.
It is. So a Christian husband is meant to imitate Jesus by leading in a way that serves his wife and family. It's the opposite of sitting back and demanding things. It's about dying to self to bring life to his wife, proactively seeking her good, putting her needs and spiritual health before his own comfort. He shouldn't dodge that God-given responsibility for moral and spiritual direction, but exercise it as the humble servant of his wife and family. This helps clarify that idea of mutual submission we see elsewhere in Ephesians. It doesn't cancel out the husband's headship. It defines his character as serving, loving leadership like Christ's. 3. the church's submission, the blueprint for wives.
Okay, so if husbands model Christ, wives are called to model the church, submitting as to the Lord. Now, that word submission, it can be really loaded for people. What does it genuinely mean in this context, based on our sources?
Hmm, that's important to unpack carefully. The sources emphasize that the wife's submission isn't about culture or being inferior. It's patterned specifically after the church's willing, joyful response to Christ's loving leadership. So it means recognizing and honoring her husband's God-given greater responsibility for provision and protection. It also involves cultivating a disposition and inclination of the heart to yield to his authority in Christ and follow his leadership. It's fundamentally a posture of the heart that acknowledges the structure God designed for the marriage covenant.
So it's about recognizing a role, not about inherent worth.
Exactly. The sources are clear. It doesn't mean the wife is less intelligent, less capable, less valuable. Not at all. And it's certainly not about blind, passive obedience to every single wish. It's more about embracing her role within the covenant that helps bring order and harmony, allowing the marriage to function as that picture of Christ and the church. Just as the church finds its life and purpose in following Christ's lead, the wife's submission is meant to reflect that spiritual reality, contributing to a purposeful union.
That phrase, as to the Lord, seems really central then. Does that imply a wife must always agree with her husband regardless of his decision? What if he's leading in a way that's clearly wrong or even sinful?
Yes, that phrase is absolutely critical, and it brings up the necessary question about the limits of any human authority. As to the Lord acts as a crucial boundary. A wife should never, ever replace Christ's ultimate authority with her husband's. Her first allegiance is always to the Lord. So she cannot follow her husband into sin, period.
That's a clear line.
A very clear line. And the sources explain that even when a wife finds herself in that difficult position, needing to stand with Christ against her husband's sinful direction, she can still maintain a spirit of submission. How? Not by obeying the sinful request, obviously, but through her attitude. By showing that she dislikes resisting his will, that she genuinely longs for him to turn from sin and lead rightly so that harmony can be restored. It shows her readiness to honor him as head when he's aligned with God. So there's a structure, yes, but ultimate loyalty is always to Christ. Submission is to Christ through her husband, never absolute submission to a flawed human if it means disobeying God. 4, the paradoxical double rule of love.
Okay, now here's a concept from the sources that really caught my eye, this double rule of love for husbands. Love her more and love her less. Let's tackle love her more first. What does that mean for a husband's focus and priorities?
Yes, this is quite a striking idea, isn't it? Love her more means loving his wife more than absolutely anything else on earth, and the sources get specific. More than money, more than buddies, more than personal comfort or ease, more than sex itself, apart from their unique bond, more than hobbies or art, more than career or fame, even more than his own life. She is his earthly best.
Wow, that's comprehensive.
It really is. It's not just about feeling affectionate. It's about a radical, conscious prioritizing of her above all other temporary things, making her well-being, her flourishing, her happiness, his supreme goal in this life. And there's a warning attached. Living just for your own private pleasure at your wife's expense is actually self-destructive. You end up undermining your own deepest joy. So this first part calls for this intense, focused devotion to her as his most precious earthly gift.
All right, so if he's loving her more than all those things, how on earth does the love her less part make sense? Loving someone less sounds like the opposite of what marriage needs.
And that brings us right to the heart of the paradox, which is really about preventing idolatry. The crucial point is, a husband must love his wife less than God. This isn't about dialing back his genuine love and care for her. Not at all. It's about making sure that deep human love doesn't become an idol, the thing that takes God's rightful place in his heart as his ultimate source of identity, security, or satisfaction.
Okay. Keeping God primary.
Exactly. The sources put it quite bluntly. It's neither wise nor kind to basically worship your spouse, to call an idol by sweet names. Instead, a husband's supreme adoration must be for God alone, the God who gives his wife her worth and beauty in the first place. This divine priority actually secures his love for her. It grounds it. By loving God most by being rooted, as the sources say, by the stream of heaven's joy, his love for his wife won't dry up when difficulties come. It becomes a grace flowing from God's eternal promises. Ultimately, that line sums it up. The greatest gift you give your wife is loving God above her life. It anchors the marriage love in something eternal, keeping it pure and strong, paradoxically enabling a deeper, truer love for her than if she were his God. Finding joy in the joy of the other. Christian hedonism in marriage.
This next idea builds on that, I think, finding joy in the other person's joy. The sources actually use the term Christian hedonism within marriage. The argument seems to be that unhappiness in marriage often comes not from seeking pleasure, but seeking it selfishly. Can you unpack that?
Yes, it's a fascinating redirection of our natural desires. The sources argue that a lot of marital misery happens because spouses aren't seeking their own pleasure in the pleasure of their spouse. Paul, interestingly, doesn't try to squash our natural desire for happiness. Instead, he sort of uh, builds a channel for it within the marriage covenant. He points out that basic fact. No one hates their own body, but nourishes and cherishes it. We naturally seek our own well-being. Even tragic acts like suicide, Paul implies, are driven by a desire to escape misery, showing that innate drive for happiness or relief.
Okay, so we're wired to seek happiness.
Right, and when husband and wife become one flesh, that profound unity described in Genesis, then seeking your spouse's holy joy becomes the pathway to your own deepest, truest joy. It's about fulfilling that innate desire for happiness, but doing it outwardly, selflessly, within the God-designed structure of marriage. It's understanding that your well-being is now fundamentally tied to your spouse's. It reorients self-interest towards the other.
That's quite a paradigm shift. How does Christ himself model this? The sources say he sought his own joy in the joy of the church. How did he do that?
Well, Christ's love for the church is the ultimate example. He loved the church and gave himself up for her. Why? So that he might present her to himself in splendor, holy, and without blemish. And remember, Hebrews 12, it says, Christ endured the cross for the joy that was set before him. What was that joy? The sources argue it was the joy of having his bride, the church, redeemed, purified, and united with him forever.
So his ultimate satisfaction was tied to the church's ultimate good.
Precisely. His own delight was inseparable from the joy and glorification of his bride. He didn't just endure the cross out of duty. His sacrifice was fueled by the anticipation of his bride's splendor. So the pattern for husbands is exactly that. Seek your joy in the joy of your wife. Actively sacrificially pursue her holy joy, knowing that, like Christ, your deepest satisfaction is found in her well-being and flourishing in God.
So just to make sure I'm tracking this, if I wholeheartedly focus on the holy joy of my spouse, I am in fact also pursuing my own joy. How does that paradox actually make a marriage reflect Christ and the church?
That's exactly the point the sources make. The paradox works like this. If you live only for your own private pleasure, often at your spouse's expense, you are fundamentally living against yourself. You're damaging the one flesh union, and so you sabotage your own potential for deep joy.
Right, because you're harming part of yourself in a sense.
In a very real sense, yes. But if you flip that, if you dedicate yourself wholeheartedly to the holy joy of your spouse, actively seeking their spiritual good, their happiness in God, their flourishing, then you will also be living for your own joy, the truest kind. This is the Christ-like path. It makes the marriage a living picture of Christ and his church. It channels that natural desire for happiness into a selfless yet ultimately fulfilling direction within the marriage, displaying God's glorious self-giving love. It creates this upward spiral of mutual blessing. 6. The pastor's marriage. A visible expression of ministry.
No. The sources wrap up by focusing specifically on the pastor's marriage, saying his love for his wife is essential for ministry, and even his ministry. Why is it seen as so critical, more than just having a decent private life?
Yeah, this raises that important question about the public aspect of marriage, especially for leaders. A pastor's loving marriage does several vital things for his ministry. First, it genuinely encourages the congregation. It's a living example of God's grace at work. Second, it models Christian marriage for everyone else, providing practical illustration. Third, it upholds the honor of the pastoral office itself, showing he manages his own household well, which is a biblical qualification. Fourth, it blesses his own kids, giving them that haven of love and stability.
Okay, those are significant impacts on the church and family.
Definitely. But there's more. It visually displays that deep mystery of Christ's love for the church, making theological truth tangible. On a practical level, it helps prevent the pastor's own prayers from being hindered, keeping him spiritually healthy. It also eases the huge burdens of ministry. A supportive home is crucial, and critically, it protects the church from the devastation of scandal, which so often stems from marital failure. And finally, it satisfies the pastor's own soul, allowing him to find joy in God by pursuing his wife's joy, as we just discussed. So you see, it's not just a nice bonus, it's really foundational to effective, credible ministry.
And the sources add that this calling to love his wife holds true even when things are difficult, right? If she's struggling with depression or other issues, that requires more than just feelings.
Absolutely. The call to love her as Christ loved the church doesn't depend on the wife being easy to love or always responding perfectly. It remains even as she struggles with depression or addictions or fear, or maybe just spiritual apathy. The sources draw that direct parallel again. Christ's calling was to love and die for an unclean bride, the church in her sinful, imperfect state.
Wow, that's a high standard.
It is. It means the love pastors show their wives should mirror Christ's unwavering, grace-filled love for his own imperfect church, embracing her weaknesses, patiently nurturing her, faithfully seeking her spiritual good, even when it's hard, even when it costs him. Loving her like this, the sources argue, is a profound blessing to the church. It models grace under pressure. And living out that kind of selfless, Christ-like love in his closest relationship actually strengthens the pastor's own soul for his wider ministry, equipping him to show that same grace to the whole flock.
So wrapping this all up for our listeners, today we've really tried to unpack God's, well, stunning design for marriage, seeing it not just as a human thing, but as the sacred reflection of the eternal relationship between Christ and his church. From Genesis right through to Ephesians, the Bible gives us this compelling picture. Husbands leading with a serving, sacrificial love like Christ's, and wives responding with a joyful, discerning respect that mirrors the church.
And putting it all together, it really means our marriages, just in how they're structured and how we live them out day to day, have this incredible potential, this privilege, to show the world something amazing about God. And that search for our own joy finds its best, highest path when we sincerely seek the holy joy of our spouse, all while keeping God firmly in first place in our hearts.
So for you, our listener, maybe something to think about is this. How does seeing marriage as a parable of Christ and the church change how you view it, whether you're married or single? Consider how living out these biblical roles, especially that paradoxical love her more and love her less idea, might open up ways for God's grace and joy to flow through your relationships, maybe in ways you hadn't expected. It's truth meant for living, not just thinking about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, a segment of Reformed Thinking. We really hope this exploration has given you some fresh insights into the richness of God's Word on this vital topic. Until next time.